Howdy guys, welcome back to another cruise of smooth. Just starting out the work commute today. Before we get into today's topic, something that I have neglected to do in the first couple podcasts, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button, and if you're interested in knowing when we get new videos uploaded, go ahead and hit the notification bell so that you are made aware as soon as the new video drops. I'm going to try to be posting every day through my work week or whenever I end up commuting anywhere by myself. So 4 or 5 days a week. But that's provided that I can come up with topics that are interesting to me and that I think I have enough of an idea on or an opinion on to talk about. So today I think I want to talk about my granddad. Give you just the backstory that I know. He was born in like 26 or 28. I think it would have been 26. He lived in Minnesota. When he grew up, his father was kind of a abusive, mean drunk, and so he ended up getting a job early on. He only had a 6th grade or 8th grade education. He got a job early on to help his mother take care of his younger siblings as a teenager. I remember when he lived up in Minnesota, he worked for a logging company as a teenager. And he had actually bought, as one of his first vehicles, a retired logging truck. And every tire on that truck leaked air. So he was constantly having to pump up all of his tires because he couldn't afford to get tubes or new tires because he's helping to raise his siblings, so he's just living with it. Well, in the wintertime, he would let all the air out of the tires and fill them with water because it would freeze solid, and he didn't have to air up the tires in his truck for 5-6 months because it stayed below freezing. Another thing that he used to do back then is that old logging truck had been beaten, banged up out in the woods, so it was nothing pretty to look at. It had dents and stuff everywhere. In the wintertime, he'd drive like a fool down these roads. Well, according to him, I've never seen it. In Minnesota, when the snow plows would go down the roads, they would just pile up snow on the side of the road big time. And in the first few snows, it would melt and refreeze and melt and refreeze, so you'd end up with this huge amount of ice right next to the road. Well, he would drive down these snow-covered roads faster than he could maintain grip. And when he was making a turn, he'd scoot over against the wall and just let the wall of ice shoot his truck around the turn. He was interesting in his younger days. Well, everyone knows what happened. He might have been born before that. I'm trying to get this right in my head. Might have been born in 24. Anyway, everyone knows what happened December 7th, 1941. Soon after, the draft was instated, and my granddad's number came up. Went to basic training, was put in an anti-aircraft battalion. A bunch of half-tracks, which I might put a link in the description below. I might not. I gotta work tonight, so don't bet on it. But just Google a half-track. Google a World War II half-track. It's essentially a 2.5-ton truck from that era with 2 regular wheels on the front of it and tank tracks where the back 2 axles would go. And they would go pretty much anywhere you pointed them. They had a couple different half-tracks. One of them with a 20 or 30 millimeter cannon, the other one with twin 50s on it. That was his truck. And some other support vehicles and whatnot in his unit. Well, a couple of his war stories that I think are pretty interesting. He had met my grandmother at a USO show. Band was playing, everyone's having a good time, dancing, the song changes, and she spins around on her heels and sees my granddad, and she said, "I think this is our song." He goes, "I think you're right." And that is how my grandparents met. And they started keeping in touch and writing each other during the war, during his deployments. Well, anyway, there was one time they were ordered to this ravine to set up in their camo nets to look for enemy planes. The way the place was shaped is the road kind of made a lazy U shape, not quite a U, and there was a ravine on the inside of it. Well, they get all situated in there and settled into their new posting. And they start hearing German armor, a German armored division, come down that road that they had come down a while earlier. I don't know the exact timeline. Well, anyway, they are not set up to take on an armored division. So their decisions their viable decisions are to attempt to run or to stay quiet and stay put, because they're under camo nets. And they blended in fairly well, apparently. Plus, they're down in this ravine, so the armored division's up on this ridge, so they could stay hidden. Well, the unit commander chose the latter. Stay hidden. One of the things that the Nazis would do if you were captured during the war, if they found your letters, they would actually write your loved ones and tell them that you were captured. So everyone in his unit is getting their letters out and burning them because they didn't want to put their loved ones through that. Someone walked up to my granddad and said, "Hey, when do we give up?" Now, I'm going to say this is the first harsh word I've ever said on the podcast, so if you're listening and there's little ears that you don't want to hear a little bit of profanity, you've been warned. And his reply to that was, "When monkeys fly out your ass." And everyone got a very hushed chuckle out of that. And thankfully, the Germans went on past them without event. Another thing that happened during the war, and I only know a handful of stories and a handful of the locations that he was at. My granddad died before I had turned 16. I think he died when I was 14. And so I wasn't quite old enough for him to tell some of his more harsh war stories to. So some of these war stories I had heard as an adult from my dad. Well, I know he was in Sicily as he was making his move into Germany and Western Europe. He got his hands on a Bible and brought it home from Sicily, and it's all printed backwards and upside. It's backwards, so you start at the back page and you read backwards in order of print. One of the things, another couple interesting souvenirs that my granddad brought home, he brought home 2 of them, was the bullets that were pointed at him. One time the unit was on the move. He's in the point vehicle, the half track with the twin 50s. And he's going down this road where there's hedgerows on either side. So they can't really see. When the road's in a bend, they can't really see very far ahead. Well, they pop around, they're going through this bend, and a German officer's car with an officer in the passenger seat and a driver meet them in the middle of this corner. Well, both vehicles come screeching to a halt. The convoy comes to a stop behind them. The German officer grabs his submachine gun up and aims for my granddad. Well, my granddad seen what was going on, and he's standing behind 250 cals, so he gets on target and proceeds to destroy the target with prejudice. When the situation had calmed down, he jumps out of his half-track, walks over to the German officer's car, took the flags off of it, and then he grabbed his gun and ejected the bullet that was meant for him, and he said, "Never point a gun at a man with 250s. The other bullet that he had, that he brought back with him, that was his bullet, so to speak, came out of some sort of German airplane. I had mentioned before that he was in an anti-aircraft battalion. Well, they're attempting to shoot down this German airplane. The German airplane gets wise to where they are and tries to take them out. Well, my granddad shot him down. And if you use your imagination, maybe some of the war movies that you've seen, you can imagine the gore that comes with shooting a German officer in his car and shooting a German fighter pilot in his airplane. I'm not going to go into detail. I hope this podcast ends up becoming a family-friendly thing where parents, if they choose to, can listen to it around their kids and not have to worry about nightmares or answering a whole bunch of questions. And I'm going to try to preface anything that's questionable. But you can just imagine the things that he had to see during that time. And he also liberated a concentration camp and seen things there. And that story I will not tell right now. There's no need to go there with the topic of the podcast. Well, anyway, end of the war comes along. He moves back stateside, and I'm glossing over a ton of details, but him and my grandmother end up getting together and getting married. They bought an old rail car of some sort, maybe even a caboose, and lived, and I'm not making this up, in a solid steel rail car in the northwestern parts of the United States on a rail line. And their house would end up being moved around all the time and stored where the train company needed it out of the way because they'd have to use different rail spurs and stuff for different things. Ended up moving across country. Had a wife and 3 kids. Got a job installing garage doors and made a very decent, typical 1950s, 1960s life for himself after the war. Manual labor, a decent job, house, cars, family, grandkids, retired, lived out his final years as a fairly easygoing, sweethearted old man that had a mumbling and an attitude problem occasionally. Well, the reason that I told you all these stories about my granddad is you can see that he had to rise to the occasion that circumstances needed him to in his youth. There were a ton of people, if you watch different series, different movies, listen to documentaries and older interviews that have risen to the occasion over the years in combat situations. I've got a soft spot for American history. Specifically, I love World War II history because both of my grandfathers served in that war. And both of them died before I could hear a ton of stories, so it's a way for me to understand some of the things that they had to see and went through. But I love World War II history. And at the end of needing to rise to the occasion, he was able to be a fairly normal human being. But the reason why I told all these stories is to say that you never know what you're capable of until you do it. I personally know of several situations that both of my grandparents were in where it was kill or be killed, and they were able to make the decision to take care of themselves, and they were able to do it successfully. They were able to see things that no human should have to. My granddad, while he did live a fairly normal life, I know that some of that stuck with him for years. I remember when he was in his 70s, my dad had taken me to a gun live fire sale and expo. And so there's, wooden popper guns, there's rubber band guns, there's actual guns, there's ammo, there's stickers, there's shirts, you name it. And also there's a gun exposition on where there's live fires and demonstrations, and you can rent the weapons and shoot them yourself. Well, I was a kid and I didn't have a lot of money, but one of the things I bought is I bought a blank 50 caliber round. It had no powder and no primer, but it had the brass and the lead projectile. I remember next weekend we went to my grandparents' house and I wanted to show my granddad what I bought. I bring it in, say, "Papa, look at what I got." And I don't know what was going on in his mind. He never told me. I don't know that he ever told my dad before my granddad passed away. But he got a look on his face that I had never seen before or never seen since. And he just looked at me and he said, "I have shot a lot of those." And so I know that the war stuck with him. But he was capable of dealing with those things and capable of doing the things that were required of him. So, what's the point of today's podcast? Well, you never know what you're capable of till you do it. Be it achieving truly great things, becoming the next Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, becoming someone that makes an intense medical breakthrough, becoming a renowned scientist, builder, sculptor, painter, whatever. You never know, or becoming capable of doing great and terrible things. But you never know what you're capable of until you do it. So, that's the gist of the topic for today. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and if you want to see whenever we put a new video up, feel free to hit the notification bell. Like I said, I'm hoping to be putting up videos every working day for me, or every day that I end up having a commute where I'm solo, so long as I can come up with a topic. So, I hope everyone has a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.